My fiancée wanted a break because she doubted my loyalty, and 6 weeks later, she turned up pregnant. Yeah, I thought I had my life all figured out. Natalie and I had been together for 3.5 years. We met when I was 26, and she was 25. Things were solid, or so I thought. We'd met at a work conference, two ambitious professionals striving to build something meaningful in our lives. By the time I turned 30, I was about to complete my doctorate, while also planning the next chapter of our relationship. We talked about getting married, starting a family, and building a home together. I even had a ring stashed away in my desk drawer, waiting for the right moment to pop the question. We often fantasized about the future, what our wedding might look like, the names of our future kids. Natalie loved the name Amelia for a girl, and I was set on Liam for a boy. We'd even joked about what kind of dog we'd adopt. She wanted a golden retriever. I was more of a border collie guy. It was like we were writing the chapters of our life story together. I felt like she was the one, no doubt about it. But I guess I was naive, too caught up in the dream to notice the cracks starting to form. You see, I'm a physical therapist, and in my field, I work with a lot of women, colleagues, patients, even old classmates. My closest friend, Megan, happens to be one of them. We've known each other for years. Megan was like my sister, someone I relied on during some of the toughest times of my life. She was also going to stand by me as my best person at my future wedding. I made sure Natalie knew from day one that Megan was strictly a friend, nothing more. I wanted her to feel secure in our relationship, and for a long time, she did. Or at least she seemed to. But looking back, maybe there were warning signs I didn't catch. Around Valentine's Day this year, things started to shift. We were at a mutual friend's party, and after a few drinks, Natalie suddenly brought up how she didn't trust Megan. Out of nowhere, she accused me of keeping secrets about our past. She hinted that maybe Megan and I had some kind of history before Natalie and I started dating. I was floored. I tried to reassure her right then and there, but she didn't believe me. The next morning, when she was sober, I brought it up again. I asked why she was suddenly questioning me after years of trust. She muttered something about her friend, Emma from work, opening her eyes to the dynamics between Megan and me. Apparently, Emma had planted the idea that men and women can't ever just be friends. Natalie admitted she wasn't sure if she could fully trust me anymore. Even though I had never once betrayed her, I felt frustrated and hurt. Here I was, planning to propose to the woman I loved, only to have her doubt my every move. For weeks, things between us grew tense. She started pulling away emotionally. Conversations about our future turned vague. It felt like I was losing her, but I couldn't figure out how to stop it. Then came the bombshell. Natalie told me she needed space, a break to figure things out. It felt like a punch to the gut, but I reluctantly agreed, hoping this was just a temporary setback. I gave her the space she wanted. It was agonizing not to call or text her, but I wanted to respect her wishes. I still believed she'd come back to me. Weeks turned into over a month, and I hadn't heard from her. I tried to distract myself, immersing myself in work, hitting the gym, and spending time with friends, but the silence was deafening. Then, 6 weeks after our break began, Natalie reached out. She said she wanted to meet in person to talk. I was hopeful. I thought she'd apologize for doubting me, that we'd talk things through and move forward together. I still loved her, despite everything. But when I saw her, something was off. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. She looked nervous, like she'd been rehearsing what to say. Then she dropped the news she was pregnant. My first reaction was shock, quickly followed by confusion. She wasn't saying it was my baby. She admitted she'd been seeing someone else, an old co-worker, during our break. She'd been feeling insecure, jealous about Megan, and convinced herself I was hiding something. She sought comfort in someone else, and now she was pregnant. My world came crashing down. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Natalie tried to justify it, blaming her actions on her insecurities and my friendships. She said she didn't mean for it to happen, that it was a mistake. I didn't say much. I just sat there, numb, while she rambled on about how guilty she felt. But guilt didn't undo the betrayal. Guilt didn't change the fact that the future we'd planned was gone. Eventually, I stood up and walked out. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just left. Driving home, all I could think about was how easily she'd thrown away everything we'd built together. For what? A fleeting moment of doubt. 2.5 years of love, trust, and planning for a life together, wiped out in an instant. I don't know where to go from here. I'm still processing everything. But one thing's for sure, the Natalie I thought I knew is gone. I sat alone in my room for hours replaying apologies, I craved the person I thought I'd loved, the future I thought we'd build, and now I wasn't sure if either had ever been real. After that meeting, I assumed I'd feel something closure. Rage, despair, anything. But instead, there was just this hollow numbness that crept over me, as if my mind couldn't process it all at once. I moved through each day like a ghost, doing what needed to be done, but not feeling any of it. My coworkers caught on. Of course, they'd catch me zoning out, asking if I was okay, but I wasn't ready to open up. How do you even explain something like this? Yeah, my fiancée cheated with her coworker during our break, because she thought I was lying about my best friend. Just saying it out loud would have made it feel even more crushing. So, I stayed silent, bottled it all up, and told everyone I was fine. Nights were unbearable. I'd lie in bed staring at the text her name. I'd type some half-hearted message, then erase it. I wanted answers, but I didn't want more pain. Every time I pictured asking her anything, I'd imagine her with him, and it felt like the knife twisted deeper. Eventually, the lack of sleep began taking its toll. I was drained, barely managing to get through my shifts. I'd show up, try to focus, but half the time I was lost in my head. My mind kept wandering, picturing all the ways things could have been different if I'd just seen it coming. One day, during a jog to clear my head, I ended up on the ground, gasping for air. My chest felt tight, my hands were trembling, and for a moment I thought I might pass out. I sat there on the sidewalk, trying to breathe, but every time I closed my eyes, her face was there, her voice apologizing over and over. It was suffocating. I don't even know how long I sat there, but eventually, I forced myself to stand and head home. That's when I knew I needed to do something to distract myself from this unbearable weight. But no matter what I did, the anxiety wouldn't leave me alone. My heart would race, my hands would sweat, and I'd have to sit down, taking deep breaths to keep myself from spiraling. It didn't even feel like my life anymore. I was just this broken version of myself, barely holding it together. Friends kept reaching out, inviting me to hang out or watch a movie, but I'd always find an excuse not to go. I couldn't stand the thought of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Late one night, unable to sleep again, I started scrolling through old photos of us. I don't know what I was hoping to find, maybe some sense of peace, a reminder of the good times, but it backfired. Each smiling picture felt like a cruel joke, a reminder of the lies I'd believed. I deleted most of them, thinking it might help, but the memories didn't disappear so easily. I remember one particular day, walking through the park, and seeing a couple holding hands. They looked so happy, so carefree, and it felt like a knife in my chest. I'd been that guy not long ago, the one who thought his future was secure, and now I didn't even know how to make it through the next hour. It was like she'd stolen more than just our relationship. She'd taken my trust, my confidence, and even my peace of mind. Rebuilding any of that felt impossible. The breaking point came when I attended a funeral for an old mentor. She'd been like a second mother to me growing up, and I couldn't skip it, even though I was barely holding on. I dressed up, went to the service, and managed to get through the motions. But by the time I drove home, I felt like I'd run a marathon. When I got to my parents' house, I collapsed on their couch, completely drained. My dad tried to make small talk, but I was too exhausted to respond. Then, suddenly, I blacked out. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in the back of an ambulance. My dad said one moment I was sitting there, laughing at something, and the next I was convulsing. It was terrifying to hear, but when the doctor explained it was likely caused by stress and sleep deprivation, it was almost a relief. At least now I had a reason for why my body was falling apart. Still, hearing that diagnosis also made me realize I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Something had to change. I knew I had to take control of my life again. I couldn't keep letting Natalie's betrayal consume me. So, I started with the small things. I deleted her number, unfollowed her on every app, and threw away everything that reminded me of her. The photo of us at the cabin, the little notes she used to leave in my bag gone. It was painful, but also oddly liberating, like clearing out a room full of junk you've been holding onto for too long. My best friend Eric had been telling me for weeks that even thinking about her was giving her power. He was right. Why was I letting someone who had so clearly moved on continue to dictate my life while I stayed stuck, miserable? It was like I'd locked myself in a mental prison and thrown away the key. That conversation with Eric was the first time I felt like I could breathe again. It wasn't immediate. Letting go is never that simple, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, I forced myself into a routine. I'd wake up early, lace up my sneakers, and go for a run. Even when I didn't feel like it, Afterward, I'd head to work, try to focus on my patients, and come home exhausted. I knew I couldn't keep living in this endless cycle of hurt and regret. For the first time, I could see a way out, even if it was just a faint glimmer in the distance. To keep that momentum, I started setting small goals for myself that gave me something to look forward to. I signed up for a local 5,000. I dusted off some books I'd been meaning to read. I even started planning a solo trip to Oregon to hike the trails I'd always dreamed of exploring. It was like I was rediscovering who I was without her. I began to figure out what truly made me happy, independent of anyone else. There were moments of joy, moments where I caught myself laughing at something silly or enjoying a sunset without the weight of her betrayal looming over me. Those little victories felt monumental. Of course, there were still bad days. Days where the memories of what we'd planned, the house, the dog she'd wanted, a golden retriever, I'd been set on a border collie. Even the names we'd picked out for our future kids would creep back in, and I'd feel that familiar ache. But those memories didn't control me anymore. They were just fleeting shadows. I wasn't fully healed, not by a long shot, but I was making progress. Each day felt a little less heavy than the last. For the first time in months, I was okay with being on my own. It was a freedom I hadn't realized I needed. Then, just as I was starting to feel like myself again, she showed up. It was a Saturday afternoon. I just finished my run and was about to head inside when I saw her standing at my door, Natalie, holding a baby. My heart stopped. It had been 6 months since we'd last spoken, and longer since I'd let myself dwell on her beyond a passing thought. Adam, she said softly, adjusting the baby in her arms. Can we talk? I didn't know where else to go. I stood frozen, my mind racing. She looked different, like she hadn't slept in days, but it didn't soften the anger bubbling up inside me. Talk about what? I said, crossing my arms. I wasn't about to let her waltz back into my life after the mess she'd left behind. Her eyes flicked down to the baby, then back up to me. I thought you'd want to meet him, she said quietly. He's yours, Adam. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world tilted on its axis as her words sank in. What? I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. She sighed, shifting uncomfortably. I know I messed up, okay? I've been dealing with that every single day. But he doesn't have anyone else, and I thought maybe we could start over. For his sake. I laughed, humorless sound. Start over? I said, shaking my head. You think you can just show up, say a few words, and we're back to square one? You cheated on me, Natalie. You lied to me, and now you expect me to drop everything because you need help? She looked down, her grip on the baby tightening. I'm not asking for me, she said, her voice cracking. I'm asking for him. He deserves a family. Where's his dad? I asked sharply. Her hesitation told me everything I needed to know. He left, she admitted, barely audible. So now you're here, I said, my voice cold. Because you have nowhere else to go. She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked at me with those wide, desperate eyes I'd once fallen for, and for a split second, I felt a pang of something, sympathy, maybe, but it passed as quickly as it came. I'm sorry, I said, stepping back and opening the door wider. But you made your choice. You chose him over me, and now you're dealing with the consequences. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might argue, but she just nodded, holding the baby closer to her chest. Without another word, she turned and walked away. I stood in the doorway, watching her go, my heart pounding. I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, anger, but above all, I felt free. For the first time since she'd walked out of my life, I knew I wasn't going to let her back in. She was my past, and I was finally ready to leave her there.